Alrighty, this is Lab 4.4. It's on page 77 of your textbook. The title of the lab is The Effect of Temperature on Solubility. So basically what we're going to do in this lab is we created two solutions. One with a substance that we're going to call A. And what I did was I took 10 cubic centimeters of water and 10 grams of substance A, and I mixed them together. What you should notice is that at room temperature, substance A does not appear to be very soluble. There's a lot of substance left over in the bottom of that test tube. You can see that okay? So substance A is not very soluble at room temperature. Substance B is very similar. Substance B is also 10 cubic centimeters of water and 10 grams of substance. Also not very soluble at room temperature. Okay? So what we're going to do with these two test tubes is to heat them up to about the boiling point of water, about 100 degrees Celsius, and see if their solubility is affected by the temperature. In terms of data, all you have to record for this lab, you can see that, it got a little wet with the test tube. Let's see, can you see that? So we have substance B and substance A, and you're going to record over here at room temperature, describe what the solubility appears to be, then makes your observations once it's heated as well in terms of if the solubility changes or if it's affected at all by the temperature, and then same thing for when we cool it back down again. So after we heat it and we make our observations, we're going to take the two test tubes out of the water, put them back at room temperature, and see what happens. So one of the nice parts about this lab is that it's not actually quantitative. We don't have to take measurements, so it makes it go a little bit faster, and we just get to kind of watch and see what we see. All right, so again, for your first data point in terms of your observations, neither substance appears to be very soluble at room temperature. Now we're going to heat them up and see if heating them up changes anything. So let's see if I can move this over here. I can put this behind it so you can see it a little bit better. Okay, so what we're going to do is mix them, and I'm going to have to mix one at a time. We have glass stirring rods in here, so as you guys know, when we create solutions, it usually helps to kind of mix them a little bit, like we did with the Lab 4.1, the blue stuff, we had to mix it up. And same thing with yesterday with Lab 4.3, we had to mix it up to get the stuff to dissolve. So we're going to see if heating it has any effect on the solubility. So far, substance B actually does look like it's dissolving a little bit now that it's getting warmer. It's definitely much more dissolved than it was at room temperature. Substance A, it's really hard to tell if any of it's dissolving. There's still a lot of substance left undissolved. So I'm not sure if that's, it's hard to tell if any of it's dissolving. Substance B, I'm going to show you in just a second, is actually dissolving entirely. All of substance B is now dissolved. Okay, well, so what we can tell right off the bat, just based on observation, is that whatever substance B is, its solubility in water is definitely affected by temperature. So substance B, let's see if we can see that, is totally dissolved every last bit of it. So the solubility of substance B increases as you heat it. The hotter it gets, the more soluble it becomes. Okay. I'm going to put this back in here for just a second to show you substance A. Substance A, on the other hand, does not appear to have changed. So if any more of substance A dissolved, I mean, it's possible that some of it did, not enough to make it obvious. So it appears that substance A, when mixed in water, is not really that affected by temperature. So even when we heat it, it does not become more soluble, at least as far as we can tell just by looking at it. So that's the second part of the lab. So if you look at your data sheet, you made some observations at room temperature. Now you have some observations for when we heat it. Substance A does not appear to be affected by the temperature. Substance B becomes more soluble in water as you heat it. Now, the third part, we're going to bring this back down to room temperature again. And we're going to make some observations. I'm going to, hopefully without hurting myself here, try to hold this up so you guys can see what happens. Okay, oh, that's good. All right, so you can see substance A is on the left and substance B is on the right. I don't know if this is backwards to you guys or not, but substance A is the one that still has solid in it. Substance B is not. Watch what happens to substance B. Believe it or not, that's not actually a glare that you see. That is actual substance coming back out of the solution now that we're cooling it down again. So let me see if I can hold this up a little bit better for you to see on the camera. I need to have this in front of it, I think, so you can see it. Let's see. You see that stuff swirling around in there? And look at all the stuff that's coming back out of the solution. So what's really interesting is that when we heated it, all that stuff totally dissolved. There was no solid in there at all. You just saw that. It was a totally clear liquid. As soon as we cool it back down again and decrease the temperature, this substance comes right back out of the solution again. We call this a precipitate. When a solid comes out of a saturated solution, we call that a precipitate. It's pretty cool to see it on the camera, but it's much more impressive in person because it actually kind of looks like snow. It looks like little crystals forming in the solution. So what you should notice, if you go back to the beginning of the video, there was about this much solid undissolved in the solution at room temperature. We heat this one up, substance B, and it totally dissolves. The whole thing becomes crystal clear, like it looks like it's just water at a very high temperature, close to 100 degrees Celsius. As soon as we bring that temperature back down again, all of that stuff comes right back out of the solution. And it's really neat because you can actually see it seemingly to appear out of nowhere. It looks like it's just sort of coming from nowhere. It's actually kind of neat. So anyway, substance B is definitely affected by temperature with regards to its solubility in water. At room temperature, it's not very soluble. When you heat it up, it becomes significantly more soluble. When you bring it back down again, all that stuff will come right back out of the solution. So that's our lab. Substance A really does not appear to have changed much at all throughout the entire lab. At the beginning, if you go back to the beginning, not very soluble. When we heat it, still does not appear to be very soluble. Cool it down, same thing. It appears to stay about the same throughout the entire lab. So not every substance is affected by temperature with regards to its solubility. So the solubility of all substances doesn't necessarily increase as you heat it, just some substances. Okay. I wanted just to point out in your book, I'm not sure how well you'll be able to see it on the video, but if you look at the bottom of page 78, you can see that sentence. It says, when a solid crystallizes out of a saturated solution in this manner, we say that it precipitates out of solution, and we call the solid a precipitate. So with substance B, we observed a precipitate. At a very high temperature, it was completely dissolved, and as we cooled it down, it appears that a solid crystallizes right out of the solution, and so we say that it precipitates out of solution, and then the solid is then called a precipitate. The other thing that you're going to want to spend some time looking at, if you're not here, is the graph on the bottom of page 79. We call this a solubility curve. Solubility curves show you the solubility on the y-axis versus the temperature on the x-axis for different substances. So if you look at the yellow line that says sodium chloride, that was actually our substance A. You can see, you might want to look at your own book, but you can see that the solubility of sodium chloride in water doesn't really change all that much when you heat it. It does go up ever so slightly, but in terms of just the observations we can make by looking at it, it does not appear to be any more soluble at a higher temperature. Although, if you look at the graph, it is a slight bit more soluble at a higher temperature. Our substance B was potassium nitrate, which is the blue line, which you can see clearly becomes much more soluble as you heat it. So if you look at around room temperature, which is about 20 to 25 degrees Celsius, somewhere in the middle there, it looks like from my perspective that about 30, maybe like 35 grams per 100 cubic centimeters will dissolve at room temperature. But then when you heat it up to about 100 degrees Celsius, now we're looking at about 240, about 240 or 241, 241 grams of potassium nitrate can dissolve in 100 cubic centimeters of water. So the solubility goes up significantly as you heat that substance. And so we call that a solubility curve. And that is how some substances are affected by temperature with regards to their solubility.